Exactly. And really, the further the separation goes here between Bitcoin and gold, the more encouraged you should be of an inevitable Bitcoin run, especially because so many people are flocking out of crypto right now. That just increases the likelihood of an eventual catch up because those people who are flocking out, where are their coins going? They're mostly going toward key stakeholders.
Hey folks, welcome into the Thinking Crypto podcast, your home for cryptocurrency news and interviews. And joining me today is Brian from Santiment, and we are going to do a deep dive into the metrics around Bitcoin and the top altcoins to get an idea of what's happening in the crypto market and if, Brian, you should leave crypto and go to precious metals.
Yeah, Cliff Notes, the answer is no. I don't believe that we need to go anywhere, and I'd say that whether I was working for a crypto company or not. I think we do have a lot of people who are pretty impatient and agitated right now by the lack of fun crypto has provided for a couple weeks now. The month started off great. If you remember the first week of January, it was like, oh, we're finally awake again. And now we're kind of back to this sideways slumber and waiting for crypto to catch up to gold and silver, which has been the huge talk this week in particular.
Yeah, look, gold is a shiny object, so is silver, but man, you got to be careful because you look at their charts, they're going parabolic. It's green candle after green candle, and I've seen that in crypto, and usually that is a sign of watch out because everybody's getting greedy. They're lining up to buy these assets and much more, and the market always does the opposite.
Exactly. All the FOMO, as many of you have seen on your timelines, appears to be flowing toward precious metals from people who've never owned gold and silver in their lives or a mining company, what have you. They're suddenly very interested because that's where the prices have been moving up. And we've all seen the charts of early adopters versus late adopters and which side tends to do well. And spoiler alert, it's not the late adopters. It's the people who were in on the initial incline of gold and silver. And yes, they've been doing very well for a while. They've outperformed the Bitcoin. Gold's up 70-ish to 80-ish% over the past year. Silver's up, I think, over 3x now or close to it in the past year, while Bitcoin's down about 10 to 12%, depending on the timing of when you're watching this video, over the past year itself. So from what I'm seeing, the FOMO is finally hitting its peak for gold and silver because people have just had enough of waiting for Bitcoin and which random altcoin might temporarily pop. And they're just saying, well, look at gold and silver. They've been going up for a long time now. Clearly, that's the play now. That's the new crypto. And people are flocking out of crypto, which historically is a good thing that's showing that we're finally getting close to that crowd capitulation.
Absolutely. The key word there, capitulation, right? And you have the herd, the crowd, giving up. They're getting depressed and much more. And as we always talk about, the market always does the opposite of the herd.
Exactly. Yeah. And we'll look at some greed and fear for crypto as well. But I figured we'd start off just by checking out the 7-day returns. Also notable is the fact that Bitcoin's discussions are up 47% over the past week compared to the week prior. That's not because crypto discussions were dead last week. It's because crypto discussions are way up this week for negative reasons. People are bashing Bitcoin for being a quote unquote dead asset simply for not keeping up with gold and silver. It's only down 10 to 12% over the past year. That's not that big of a deal in crypto and can literally be made up for in a day. And that suddenly it's back to neutral. Mm-hmm. But because of the context, because it shows such a lag behind precious metals, it's really getting a lot of negative discussion just this week with all of the all-time high discussions related to gold and especially silver, which has just been on a crazy a crazy 1-year run, but especially in the last 2 weeks, it's really emerged.
As far as the sentiment compared to, I don't know if you have the calculator, so to speak, of showing, Bitcoin mentions, are they generally negative, and then with gold and silver, it's positive right now?
Yeah, let's take a look at just Bitcoin by itself really quick, and then I'll show a really interesting chart that compares how much discussion is going on for each sector. So just in terms of the ratio of positive versus negative commentary, it actually peaked here right on New Year's as we suddenly saw Bitcoin get back above 90K, and then it's gradually fallen back down as prices have essentially failed to launch. And we're back here at about 87.5K at the time of this recording. So nothing too major. We're not seeing any FUD. It's mostly just kind of neutral, regular discussions relating to Bitcoin. Overall social volume is up for it, but it's not at a point where there's some really encouraging FUD, at least on this particular chart context. What does look encouraging is the fact that Bitcoin, make this a little bigger, Bitcoin here in blue, the actual discussions related to it, like I said, they're pretty stagnant. Silver going through the roof right now, as you would expect, with what Tony and I have just mentioned about silver hitting all-time highs and all the hype going that way. And then gold actually kind of got its peak 2 weeks ago when it was making all-time highs and silver wasn't doing enough to separate itself. Well, now even gold is starting to go back down because all the attention has moved towards silver. So even if you are deciding to get into silver or gold right now, this chart should tell you gold might be the better option between the two because silver's FOMO is just through the roof at the moment. But what FOMO isn't through the roof is Bitcoin, which is continuing to show arguably a slight decline. I mean, especially going back to mid-November when it really bottomed out and the FUD was at its peak. But it's kind of fallen. If I just isolate it really quick, you can see how it's kind of trickled down a little over time as more and more discussions have been cannibalized by silver and gold and other sectors out there. You know, meme coins had a run at the beginning of the year too. So Bitcoin is being a little left in the gold and silver dust, if you will.
Yeah, great point. And it's so fascinating to see the almost what you may say is rotation between the precious metals. So gold obviously was ripping, cool down, then silver's turn. And I think I've been seeing copper and even palladium, their charts are starting to run. It's very similar to what happens in crypto. Bitcoin runs, then you get the alts, alt season, as they would call it.
Exactly. And that's a good point, Tony. I mean, it's not even just gold and silver now. It's like anything tangible, especially during times of uncertainty, heightened fears of war. We don't need to get into the political will they, won't they, and geopolitics related to tariffs, which there was good news about a week ago with Trump pulling back on the tariff threats to those 8 European countries. And he's working something out with Greenland or with NATO regarding Greenland behind the scenes at the moment. Not much specific info has come out about that, but regardless, it does, just the fact that gold is going up this much, it isn't just like a random altcoin that a bunch of degen traders, if you will, are pumping money into. This is a real tangible asset that is getting bought up by very large players and institutions as a reaction to the uncertainty of the world right now. And God forbid, even a fear of war or something like that. That typically is what pumps these precious metals up. And clearly, just based on prices going up this much, I wish I had silver to show as well. And we should have that on Sandbase soon. I've been talking to the devs about it, but at the very least, we have gold showing. This is kind of a fear indicator, in my opinion.
But yeah, for sure. And we've seen this throughout history, the markets where gold runs and under these times of uncertainty. And, there's been lots of talks of like central banks have been buying gold and ramping that up. So it's a very different time. And, hopefully, those of us in crypto, we get our turn, but I don't know how long this run lasts for these precious metals.
Exactly. And really, the further the separation goes here between Bitcoin and gold, the more encouraged you should be of an inevitable Bitcoin run, especially because so many people are flocking out of crypto right now. That just increases the likelihood of an eventual catch up because those people who are flocking out, where are their coins going? They're mostly going toward key stakeholders. large players who want to get as many coins as possible. Obviously, Sailor is by far the most notable name. It's been well documented just how many coins he's been accumulating over the last year, 2 years especially. MicroStrategy's been memed to death over the last few months, but he's still there. He hasn't been liquidated, and he's not the only whale who's buying either. So he's, in general, whales are still something to watch, and I can pull up that chart very briefly. It's been a little underwhelming. There's not been any major movements, but at the very least, we can see the difference in key stakeholders here in bright green and retail in red. You can see it's been a slight fade for the supply held by wallets with 10 to 10,000 BTC, which we call the key stakeholder tier, and a slight uptick in retail. So it's kind of just been moving sideways in context here, but retail is still down a lot over the last, 16-ish days that we have. And whales during that same time period are actually slightly up. So I'm not too worried unless there's a huge move all of a sudden. And I think it's actually a good sign that there's not like crazy levels of dumping, just a very small fade going on with the key stakeholders.
Yeah, on the micro, there's a lot of ebbs and flows, but when you zoom out, you see the larger trend, right? So last time we met, we were seeing the retail going down, and we're seeing the whale investors starting to pick up. But yeah, on the micro, any given week, there could be ebbs and flows there.
Exactly. I mean, these are the big moves. Like if we have an all-time high here on the 5th or 6th, depending on your time zone, and then all of a sudden you get like this crazy dump between the 12th and November 30th, that's the sign that we're in trouble. But since then, they've actually been pretty good. And the only thing holding me back from getting super excited is retail's also kind of accumulating. So it's kind of that middle class that's been hemorrhaging coins to these two. I'd like to see retail start to really move down and show signs of direness and fear and frankly, just being super pissed off rather than just frustrated and annoyed, like I think the majority are right now.
So, Brian, this could be a sign, not guaranteed, of course, but maybe in the coming month or so, there's another catalyst, in addition to precious metals ripping and going parabolic, that further drives retail to capitulate, like we were talking about earlier. I don't know if it's more tariffs. I don't know whatever it is. Maybe Bitcoin dumps down to 78K again, and they're like, oh my gosh, it looks like we're going all the way down into a bear market. That's an event. The whales pick up momentum, and retail, they're dumping.
Yeah, I mean, price is usually the biggest reason. Obviously, it's usually like if price goes down, traders will attribute it to something. They might say it's Powell and the interest rates. They might say it's Trump and the tariffs. They might say Putin and the ongoing war with Ukraine, whatever it is. Price is usually the start. And then people are like, oh, this is why that price is moving down. Now that subject is a big deal to me because it's reflecting in the price. So I think you're spot on. Like sub 75K or something is something I've seen spammed a lot as like a key support level. It's a big round number. If we dip below that, expect this red line to really start to fall off a cliff, which would be the sign to buy.
Yeah, and even though it's a painful thing, it's actually a good thing for the market. If we are going with this thesis of whales move the market, which I do believe they are, and clearly the data supports that, it would be painful, but very good for the rebound and the rally to continue from there.
Exactly. So, we're not saying it's definitely going to go below 75K, but if it does, I would expect behavior and the reactions to that to be the key to kind of light how the rest of 2026 goes.
And how does the MVRV look for Bitcoin?
Yeah, so actually it's looking pretty good right now. As you'd suspect with this retrace, it's gone down. Price is down since the 14th, about 9, almost 10% now. And that's been enough to push the average trading returns for those active in the past 30 days down to about negative 3.7%. So this is officially slightly undervalued. And then the 365-day MVRV is down at negative 12.3%, which is getting back to late December levels before we had that rebound. So I like the fact that both the short and long-term average returns are now officially in negative together. They're not in, super crisis mode like they were here in November when we saw that huge buy opportunity, but we may never get to that zone. Really, the way to look at this is the lower it is below 0%, the higher the upside is, or the less risk you have in opening a new position or adding to a current one.
Oh, absolutely. And I wouldn't mind seeing that go down a tad bit more. Obviously, not like November or even, the tariff announcement crash that we had at the beginning of 2025. But to your point, both being underwater is such a good sign. Maybe, again, Brian, sticking to the theme here, that if there's some sort of catalyst that drives Bitcoin below 80K, right? And the fear is there, the price is going down, precious metals continue to rip. You have the full capitulation. These averages here continue, the short and long term continue to go down, is just a perfect setup again for like a face melting rally. If those things are align, the stars align essentially.
Exactly. And especially if prices go down below 80K quickly, right? Because velocity matters. Like 80K by next week is a lot different than sub 80K in 3 months. So if that happens, you'd see very low MVRVs all of a sudden that kind of rival what we saw here, and we might have a similar buy setup. So I think you're spot on.
Yeah, and there's something I was sharing with folks, where that price went below 80K in November. There could be like a double bottom forming before you move, and then that's like a chart thing. It's not guaranteed, but it wouldn't invalidate any structures. It would just be a retest of that support level that was hit.
Yeah, there's some whiz kid TA traders out there that really can follow like the cup and handles and all those patterns really well. We don't follow that quite as much, but I do know that there's, from a psychology perspective, there's a lot of truth to the fact that when that first bottom hits, the higher low versus the lower low matters a lot. Recently, January 25th, just a couple days ago, we got as low as, I think it went a little like the low 86Ks might have been the low 85Ks. I'm kind of zoomed out at the moment, but if we go below that number on this next bottom, then we have a good argument to go all the way to 80 or 75. If we don't go below that bottom and then starts to rise, that could be a good sign that this bounce is legit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. How's Ethereum looking as the top altcoin?
Yeah, so for Ethereum, it's pretty similar right now. -5, a little over -5 or under -5 for 30-day traders and about -9 for 365. It had a nice little jump here in the middle of the month, that second week of January, but it's gotten hit pretty hard since the 14th, down a little more than Bitcoin. Yeah, it's down a little over 12% since then. Pretty similar MVRVs. I don't see enough of an argument from an MVRV perspective to put one in a better buy zone than the other.
Mm. Good to see it's below the neutral, so that's a good sign. And how's sentiment around Ethereum?
So sentiment wise, pretty run of the mill. It's very similar to Bitcoin right now, just average most days. We saw a little FOMO. This would have been the sign that Ethereum's getting a bit overheated. And we dropped right after, so that worked as expected.
Yeah.
But we're waiting for something like this, like we saw when we really bottomed out in mid-November, and the negative commentary was over the ratio of positive commentary, and that kind of fueled this bounce we had.
And then how about XRP sentiment?
XRP, a little more positive. I haven't kept up with the latest news about XRP as much as some people have. I don't know if you've heard anything, but we've seen a couple weird isolated bullish spikes on the 25th and the 13th that could have coincided with news. Either way, XRP has retraced quite a bit, and it's back down to 188 at the moment, retracing It hit its high a little earlier than Bitcoin and Ethereum, but it's dropped a little over 21% since.
Yeah, there have been some specific news items, but they kind of like flash in the pan. When news comes out, everybody's tweeting about it, and you get a little bit of hype around it, but nothing sustainable. So I think that's where those spikes in sentiment are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this spike here was as big with 3.5 bullish comments per one bearish comment. This was about the same as this exact top that happened back in mid-September. So that's not great. There might be a little too much optimism for XRP to justify a big bounce right now. We don't have any biases or bad things to say about XRP at all. And the argument for it long term is still great. But I think from a short term perspective, you don't want to see quite this level of FOMO that does appear a lot more prominent than Bitcoin and Ethereum.
Absolutely. And how does XRP MVRV look?
Yeah, actually, it looks a little better from a long term perspective. It's way down at about negative 22%, whereas 30 days about the same as Bitcoin and Ethereum because they had their big run a little earlier, but it was bigger of a spike. Like XRP really went and had a nice surge to start the year, going all the way up about 27%, 28% before retracing. The 30-day mild buy zone, long term, it's in a legit buy zone. So this is a good sign. It looks like a slightly less risk asset compared to Bitcoin and Ethereum, according to MVRV.
Good to see. I know some people may not like this, but again, I go back to good to see the short-term and long-term MVRV below the neutral line. That's good. It means at least a setup is coming in the near term for a reversal. So let's see, maybe an additional capitulation, based on whatever news, I don't know. And then we bottom out and then we start moving.
Exactly. And I wanted to show the trending coins too, because we've had a few interesting ones that are making the rounds right now across social media, according to our data. So we've got the usual Ethereum and Bitcoin here. Tether's actually been number one, which is often correlated with fear. You don't see Tether talked about a lot unless people are kind of frustrated with crypto overall.
They launched the US stablecoin today, so I think that's why.
Right. Yeah. So this appears to actually be optimistic news with a new US stablecoin being launched, supported by Anchorage Digital Bank and Cantor Fitzgerald. And it's also increased its gold reserves, which people are going to react positively to because they're increasing reserves in something that's been pumping like crazy. So they look really smart to the average Joe right now. I don't know whether it's going to end up smart or not, but it's been enough, this news, to launch Tether into the number one slot in terms of trending coins right now. Ethereum and Bitcoin are doing their normal thing. And then I've also seen Nexo in the news a lot. Mentions of Nexo's investment products, loyalty program updates, regulatory compliance, utility of the Nexo token. And they've been in the news a couple of days now. I can't quite tell. Maybe it's related to some disappointment, but the bullish and bearish meter looks pretty neutral right now in terms of the crowd mood toward it. So for those of you following Nexo, this might be interesting to you. Monero hitting its all-time high, a little over a week ago, and has kind of retraced a bit along with the rest of crypto since. But it's still getting a lot of attention right now and being compared to, of course, Zcash, which had its big development or developer fallout a couple of weeks ago. And it's still being mentioned next to Bitcoin for its privacy upsides. And then I also see Avalanche here with a potential Avalanche ETF, or I should say the launch of its first US listed spot, Avalanche ETF on NASDAQ, which is interesting. I mean, Avalanche doesn't quite get the press of like Solana and XRP or even Ethereum, but it's certainly getting a lot of attention from people who may not have ever heard of Avalanche or never really paid much attention to it because of the ETF launch that is making the rounds right now.
Yeah, I saw that news yesterday. Very interesting, man. I hope crypto can catch up to these precious metals. What is the sentiment looking like for Solana?
Yeah, good question. And maybe we could even check Avalanche too. I'm curious with the ETF what that's done. But first, Solana. Solana appears to be a little on the high side. Uh, at least in the last 24 hours, there's about 5.5 bullish comments per one bearish comment. So it's pretty up there. The price certainly isn't. It's down to about 124 at the time of this recording. So um, it does tend to get some very jarring bullish spikes, like back here, like 8.5 bullish comments per bearish post, and that coincided with the top, as you would expect. This one coincided with the top temporarily, as you would expect. The last time I really saw people showing FUD toward it was on January 1st, and that was when things took off. So if you're a Solana fan, wait for something a little more reasonable, at least from a sentiment perspective, if you want to buy with confidence right now. Right now, the optimism among all your peers in Solana seems to be quite high.
Yeah. I know last week they had a big announcement about a new standard for like tokenization, similar to what exists on Ethereum.
Mhm.
So I don't know if that's what's causing that spike, but it could be.
Could be. Yeah, I saw like a 24-hour webinar with like the crypto bird team and stuff, and that got a lot of positive press.
Hmm.
Um, but for whatever reason, I mean, Solana's marketing is doing a great job, and they're constantly coming out with new initiatives. So it keeps the crowd optimism pretty high on it consistently.
Oh, for sure. You mentioned Avax. We could take a look at that as the last one.
Yeah, let's see what this ETF news has done. Interesting, not much at all. So
Yeah.
either it's being a little swept under the rug, but it's certainly enough to get on our trending coins list.
Hmm.
But I see this positive spike here, but there's still a lot of negativity with it. And I would have to presume it's just because people don't care much. I mean, just in the past 2 weeks, it's down 20%, but like it's tough to launch an ETF when you go back 4 months or so, September 23rd, and it's lost 2/3 of its market cap. I mean, Avalanche has been absolutely hammered price wise.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't get as much attention. It's kind of like it comes in after ETH and Solana, as you know, as far as they do similar things, right? So they don't get as much presence, even though you know I think it's a solid project. And to your point, it's coming in after a Solana ETF is launched, after an ETH ETF is launched, and you know those communities are large. They get a lot of partnerships and things like that. So it's pretty tough for them to kind of break through.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm noticing this huge flash crash. I know there were a handful of assets that had just insane crashes during that temporary tariff threat in mid-October that got lifted a couple days later by Trump, and he worked it out with China. But this drop was just jarring. I forgot that this happened for a few notable assets, and Avalanche was one of them. And of course, a lot of FUD came right after and didn't really make a difference. Avalanche has just been following its namesake, if you will, and having an avalanche.
Yeah. Oh man, I am a AVAX token holder. Although I don't, you know, I have more ETH than Solana, of course, but I'm hoping it can recover and do well this cycle. And but good to see it's getting an ETF, so at least that could help drive demand.
Yeah, I mean, there's only a few coins out there that have them, so we'll see what it can do.
Absolutely, good stuff, Brian. You know, as always, hopefully, and next time we meet, things are in a better position. But it is what it is. And folks, if you want to check out these charts and all this great data, go sign up for Santiment. Brian, you can get a free account where you can get access to some of these charts, right?
Yeah, take a trial for 2 weeks, no charge, no nothing, and if it suits you and helps your trading strategy, become a member. Even memberships are quite affordable, and yeah, I appreciate the shout out on that, Tony.
But yeah, so the links will be in the description, folks. Check it out. You want to be educated and informed as much as possible as you're navigating this market. And obviously, we'll keep bringing you guys the updates. But if you have an account, you can go pull up the data at any point and take a look at it for yourself, and build your skill sets around the market, understanding sentiment and movements of whales and retail and all that jazz. So be sure to check it out. Brian, let's see. Should I reverse jinx myself? Say. Maybe we'll be in the crash next time we meet, and things are going to be bloody.
You'll have a handful of viewers who are annoyed no matter what you predict, but I think we're all kind of hoping for a little bit of a wake up call for crypto eventually. Whether it's news or maybe some gold and silver profits coming back into crypto. Let's hope that the month ends strong and we go into February with a little bit more to root for.
Yeah, and I hope a big catalyst could be the market structure bill, and we'll see how that makes its way through Congress. But we know there could be potentially a government shutdown at the end of this month, so maybe that's a catalyst that drives things a bit lower.
Yeah, I don't think it really hurt crypto the last time that happened. So maybe it could benefit. We'll of course try to hold off on analyzing until it actually happens, but there's some things to look forward to here.
Well, for sure. All right, Brian, good stuff. Catch you in the next one.
You betcha.